Hi, it's been a while since I've made one of these videos, and I'm trying out a new system that hopefully will work all right for us. And it involves using this little board instead of standing in front of a big whiteboard. There's a little bit of a glare issue with the lighting in this room right now, but hopefully I'll figure that out in throughout the video, and we'll be able to see everything we need to see. So this video is algebraic symbol manipulation in 6 easy steps. And I'll start off by showing you the steps so you'll know where we're headed with this. First step, no big denominator. And I'll describe these steps to you shortly. Second step, distribute. Get rid of those parentheses. Third step, transfer terms that don't involve the objective. Transfer terms without the objective. Fourth step, multiply or divide. Fifth, root or exponentiate, exponents or roots, square roots. And six, simplify. All right, so knowing where we're headed, and hopefully at the end of the video you can come back to the beginning and understand that list better. So now that we know where we're headed, let's jump in to some examples and see how this is done. So our first example I want us to do is a really simple one, but I just want to demonstrate to you how this manipulation of algebraic symbols, there's just big words to describe something you already know how to do. This is stuff you've been doing over and over with numbers. Now we're just going to do it with symbols, with letters, Greek letters, whatever, with symbols instead of numbers. And a lot of times this is easier than using numbers because you don't have to find a final answer a lot of times. You just get it as simple as you can and then leave it, because there's nothing else you can do, because dividing, multiplying, adding, subtracting letters doesn't make sense, so you can just leave it there a lot of times in the end, rather than having to actually worry about all of the arithmetic. So hopefully you'll find this actually in the end simpler than some of the stuff you've been doing in the past. But first of all, I just want you to know, don't freak out. That's always my #1 rule of math, and for this in particular, definitely don't freak out. This is all stuff you already know how to do. We're just doing it with symbols, letters, instead of with numbers, all right? So the example I want us to start off with is really simple. You know this equation, A equals LW, which is the equation for the area of a rectangle, right? Length times width is the area of a rectangle. Sorry, I have kittens that want to be involved in this video really badly. So my apologies if I get distracted or if things go haywire and they start playing with the camera or whatever. Hopefully none of that will happen by the time we're done with this. Okay, so A equals LW, and we want to solve for W. Those are the words that will often be used. All that means is you want W to be on its own side of the equal sign. You want W to be by itself, in its own room. Think about W as one of several siblings. It wants its own room, wants to be by itself, wants to kick out everybody who's on its side over to the other side. They're not getting out of the house completely. They'll still stay in the equation. He just wants them on the other side of the house, all right? He just wants to be alone on his side. So the first thing I always do is underline what I'm looking for. Underline it, star it, circle it, whatever works for you to remember what it is you're solving for. So we want to solve for W. We want W to be by itself on the side of its side of the equal sign. So I'm going to underline W. How do we get it there? How do we get it by itself? Well, just like you would if you were doing this with numbers. Say we had 8 equals 4W. This is the kind of thing you're used to looking at, right? 8 equals 4W. How would you get the W by itself? How would you solve for W? You divide by the thing that's multiplied by it, right? So divide by 4 on both sides, and you end up with, you simplify that, right? 8 over 4 is 2. 2 equals W, all right? So just like we did with numbers, do the same thing with the letters. L happens to be what's multiplied by W. So just like we did with the 4 over here, we're going to divide. Divide by L on both sides. All right, because remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to do the other. We're not kicking them completely out of the house. We're just kicking them to the other side, right? So what happens? The L's now cancel, and we're left with A over L equals W. W is on its own side of the equation. It's happy. We're done. We've solved for W. A over L equals W. There's no more simplifying we can do. We're done. This is our solution. All right, so see, this is stuff you already know how to do. Just wanted to start with a simple one that lets you know this is nothing to freak out about. This is all stuff you've done before. All right, let's kick it up a notch, and we'll start using our 6 easy steps. All right, so now we're going to do the volume of a cylinder, which is 1/3, or the surface area. No, this is the volume, so I guess it should be V instead of A. No, this is surface area. My bad. I apologize. I'm trying to think on the fly. All right, so none of that really matters. What really matters is we have this equation. A equals 1/3 pi. Ooh, there's a scary symbol. Don't freak out. Just a symbol. We're going to treat it just like we treat anything else. R squared H. All right? A equals 1/3 pi R squared H. And we want to solve for H. All right? Let's go through our list. Remember that list? Hopefully you wrote it down at the beginning so you can look back at it while we go through it. The first thing we want to do is get rid of any big denominators. Big denominator, what I mean by that is if there were something that over here, there's a big denominator so a bunch of stuff over here is divided by. Here we don't have that. We only have one term. There's no plus or minus stuff, which means there's no big denominator. A big denominator would be a denominator. I'm defining big denominators, what I'm calling it. You won't find it in a textbook called this. It's just how I refer to it. Big denominator is a denominator that spans across a plus or a minus sign, okay? And since we don't have any plus or minus signs here, we don't have any big denominators. So that's number 1. Number 2, distribute. Get rid of the parentheses. We don't have any parentheses here, so we're done with number 2. Number 3, transfer the terms without objective, the terms that don't have to do with our objective. What's our objective? Our objective is H. We want to get H on the side by itself. Is there a term that doesn't involve H? No. And by term, we mean the different things that are separated by a plus or minus, right? So there's no plus or minus here. There's only our one term here, and the whole term has an H in it. So there's no term without the objective. We're done with number 3. Number 4, multiply or divide. Now we have something we can do. Number 4. So H is multiplied by all this stuff. If we want to get H by itself, we want to divide by all this stuff on both sides to leave us with H, right? So let's do that. We can do it one at a time. We can do it all together if you're up for that. I'll do it one at a time just so we can keep up with each other here. So first of all, I'm going to divide by 1/3 on both sides. So to divide by 1/3, divide this whole side by 1/3, divide this whole side by 1/3. That's important. You want to divide the whole side. So if there were plus or minuses, you divide the whole side. We'll deal with that in another example in a second. All right. So dividing by 1/3, the same thing as multiplying by 3. You know that from fraction world. So what we end up with is 3a. Glare's pretty bad, isn't it? 3a equals, and these two 1/3s go away, pi r squared h. And we're still looking for h, so I'm still going to underline h. All right? So now, do we still have stuff over here next to h? We sure do. How are we going to get rid of it? Divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by pi. So we get 3a over pi equals, and those two pi's go away, so we get r squared h. And we're still looking for h, so I'm going to keep it underlined. All right? We still have stuff on h's side. It's still r squared. It's multiplied by h. Who cares that it's something squared, whatever? It's just something multiplied by h is all that we care about right now. So we're going to divide. Divide both sides by r squared. Divide by r squared. So I'm going to put it on the bottom over here since we're dividing by it, right? All right, now the r squareds cancel here. We end up with 3a over r squared pi equals h. Are we done? Our next step is root or exponentiate. We don't have any roots or exponentials that are anywhere near our h. And our last step is simplify. Is there anything we can do to simplify this? No, not really, because that's all symbols. There's a 3, but there's no other numbers to deal with there, so we just leave the 3 hanging out where it is. We're done. We've solved for h. 3a over r squared pi equals h. And we're done. Nice. So that's that one. Let's do another example that involves a couple of other things. Actually, I want to stick with this same equation. A equals 1/3 pi r squared h. This time, I want to solve for r. So now we can see what we're going to do with this exponent up here. All right? So, same deal. We don't have any big denominators. We don't have any parentheses. We don't have any terms without our objective. We're going to start with multiply or divide. And since we already did it one by one, here I'm going to do it all in one step. If you have trouble with doing it all in one step, no worries. Just write it out one by one. You got this. Actually, I recommend that you pause the video here, work this out, and then start it back and see if you did it right. Right? Okay, assuming that you have paused, worked it out, and you're back, let's work through this together. So I'm going to divide both sides. I want to get r by itself, okay? I'm going to divide both sides by 1/3 pi h. Okay? Because now we're already on step 4, because steps 1 through 3 didn't apply here. So divide both sides by 1/3 pi h. And so we end up, all this stuff cancels. All this stuff cancels. And we end up with a times 3, because we're dividing by 1/3, which is the same thing as multiplying by 3, right? So 3a over pi h equals r squared. Okay? Is r by itself? No, not quite, because we've got this pesky little 2 hanging out up here, right? So we have an exponent. What do we do with that? Now we're on step 5 of our 6 easy steps. Step 5 is root exponentials. Just the 2 words don't make a whole lot of sense, but what I mean by that is apply a root or an exponent, or whatever you have to do over here to get rid of this extra pesky 2, okay? What do we have to do? We have r squared. How do we get rid of something squared? You've done this before with numbers. You take the square root of both sides, right? So to get rid of that squared, let's do a root. Square root on that side, which means we have to do a square root of this side. Whole thing, remember, we have a top and bottom of a fraction. That's okay. It all goes under the square root. So now, what do we end up with? We end up with the square root of 3a over pi h equals, and here we've got square root of r squared, so we're left with just r. Now r is by itself. It's happy. Can we, step 6, simplify? Can we simplify? No, because we just have a bunch of symbols. The 3, we can't take it out from under the square root because it doesn't have a good square root. And there are no other numbers to simplify with. So we're done. We've solved for r. There was a pesky little square in there, but we knew how to handle it. Nothing we haven't seen before. All right, let's do a couple more. Let's look at this guy. Let's see what happens when we have parentheses. All right, so here's the problem. 7z times 3x minus the square root of y, all in parentheses, equals 6. And we want to solve for y. All right, so I'm going to underline y to remind us what we want to solve for. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is get rid of any big denominators. Do we have a big denominator here? No, we don't have any denominator that spans over a plus or a minus. Okay, So we're done with number 1. Distribute. We don't want to have any parentheses. How do we get rid of parentheses here? Step 2, distribute. All right, so let's do that. Use the distributive property to get rid of our parentheses here. So in doing that, we get 7z times 3x minus 7z times the square root of y equals 6. All right, so now I've distributed, and we've gotten rid of all our parentheses. Good to go. Step 2 is done. We can simplify a little bit here and multiply that 7 by that 3 there. So we have 21zx minus 7z root y equals 6. We're still looking for y, so I'm going to underline it still. All right, that's just simplifying from this step to this step. Our next step, transfer terms that don't involve the objective. Transfer terms without objective. We have any terms that don't have our objective in them? Yeah, we absolutely do, because our objective is y. And here's a term over here, separated from y by a minus sign. Anything separated by a plus or minus sign is a different term. So we have a term here that doesn't have y. How do we transfer it to the other side? Subtract it from both sides, right? So we want to subtract 21zx from this side and subtract 21zx from this side. Both sides, right? So what are we left with? These two guys go away. We're left with minus 7z square root of y equals 6 minus 21zx. And that just moved that term over to the other side. So we've transferred terms without objective. Now, multiply or divide. Is there anything multiplied by our y here? Y is what we're looking for. Keep it underlined so we don't forget. Yeah, we've got a minus 7z multiplied by it. So we just want to divide by that on both sides. And remember, even though we've got a minus sign here, doesn't matter. We want to divide this whole side by minus 7z because we're dividing this whole side by it, okay? So divide both sides by minus 7z. I'm running out of space here. Divide both sides by minus 7z. What are we left with? We're left with square root of y equals 6 minus 21zy over minus 7z. All right? Makes sense? All we did was divide by minus 7z on both sides. Now what do we got? Step 5, root or exponentiate. We've got a pesky root hanging around here, right? How do we get rid of a square root? Exactly. We square. So if we want to get y out from under the square root, square it. If we square one side, we have to square the other side, right? So let's square both sides. Squared. Squared. Put all this in parentheses before I put the square up there because I want to remember that I'm squaring the whole side. Remember? Okay, I'm going to erase the top step up here. Hopefully you've got that written down already. And I'm going to go back up to the top to write our result. All right? So our result, after we square both sides, y square root of y squared is just going to leave us with y equals 6 minus 21z over minus 7z all squared. And our last step is to simplify. Is there anything we can do to simplify this? Not really. Because we don't have stuff that interacts with each other. The 6, the 21, the 7, they don't have a common factor that we can pull out. If you wanted, you could go to all the trouble to square this, but not really necessary. We can leave it like that. We've solved for y. We're done. See? It looked complicated. It was this big old whole thing up here that involved parentheses, square roots, everything. But we did it. No problem. All right, I want to do one last one, and this one's actually not as involved as that one was. This is x equals z plus w over 3 minus y. All right, here's what we've got. X equals z plus w over 3 minus y. And we want to solve for z. So I'm going to underline z there. Or you might could circle it since it's already got these lines. If you want to make sure it stands out to you, circle it. Whatever you need to do. What are we going to do first? First, we want to get rid of any big denominator. Do we have a big denominator? Yeah, we do. It's not as big as this whole side, but it's big enough that it spans across a plus sign. So we want to get rid of it. How do we get rid of it? By multiplying the whole thing by the denominator. You've done this before with numbers, right? So I'm going to multiply this by 3, this side. I'm going to multiply this term by 3. And I'm going to multiply this term by 3. Remember, if you multiply one term by 3, you have to multiply every single term by 3. Or by whatever your big denominator is, all right? So that's how we get rid of our big denominator. And what does it simplify to? Now, these two 3's will cancel each other. So we end up with 3x equals z plus w minus 3y. All right, see that? We just multiplied by 3 every single term just to get rid of our big denominator. So that's number 1, step 1. Step 2, distribute, so we get rid of parentheses. We have parentheses here, but there's nothing multiplied on the outside of them, so we don't have any distributing to do. Or if you want to think of it as a 1 multiplied out here and you distribute the 1 all the way through to get rid of the parentheses, you can think of it that way. But basically, we can just get rid of these parentheses because there's nothing multiplied on the outside. Right? So that's step 2. We've gotten rid of our parentheses. Step 3, transfer any terms without the objective. What's our objective? Our objective, remember, is z. Which terms don't have a z in them? Both of these terms have no z in them. All right? The w and the minus 3y. They're two terms, but neither of them has a z, so we're going to transfer both of them to the other side. Z wants his own room. He wants everybody else to go to the other side of the house. All right? How do we transfer the 3y? Since it's subtracted over here, we're going to add it. If we add it on this side, we have to add it on this side. Remember? So what does that simplify to? These 3y's go away, minus 3y plus 3y, so that's 0. We end up with 3x plus 3y equals z plus w. All right, so we just moved 3y to the other side. This is all stuff you've done before. All stuff you've done before. You did it with numbers, now we're doing it with letters. Don't freak out. Letters are cool. We're still looking for z, so I'm going to keep that guy underlined. We still have one more term without the objective. This w hanging out over here. How do we get rid of it? Subtract it from both sides, just like you would with numbers. So now those w's go away. We get 3x plus 3y minus w equals z. There's nothing to multiply or divide. There's no root. There's no exponent. And there's nothing else that we can do over here to simplify it. We're done. We've solved for z. And that, my friends, is manipulation of algebraic symbols in 6 easy steps. Remember what our 6 steps were? You go back to the beginning and write those down if you haven't written them down from where I had them on the board at the very beginning. Number 1, no big denominator. Number 2, distribute. Get rid of those parentheses. Number 3, transfer any terms without the objective. Number 4, multiply or divide. Number 5, take care of any roots or exponents. And number 6, simplify. And you're done. Good luck. Have fun.